the meeting to order. All right, so as far as the agenda, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Having heard none, I guess we'll move on. How about public participation?
No,
sure.
no one sure.
All right, so nobody in person and nobody online. So we can move on to the board meeting overview.
Yeah, so I can jump right into, let me pull up my notes from the last board meeting.
And I'll mention to the group that after the last meeting, we had a little internal roundtable and decided that it makes a lot more sense to have Travis present the board meetings because in general, having the chair do it and then having him elaborate was just kind of doubling up. So it makes more sense to come from him. So that will be now on the agenda for him to do.
Yeah, and let me get to my Teams here so I can see. I just need to see the agenda for the last board meeting to refresh my brain a little. Scared here on this. Teams is all different now. Is that? Thank you. Perfect. That's
Takes a
exactly what I need. Yes. Okay, so last board meeting, the thing that was really super big for us is, so we did, one of the things we talked about here today in a little more detail, but I'll just briefly mention, is we did have a public hearing and adoption of our proposed budget for the next fiscal year. We, by Oregon law, are required to adopt a budget before June 30th. Our approach strategically is to try to adopt the budget in May, providing room for June if we need it. Last year we did need that breathing room and we had adopting the budget in June, but this year we made the May one. We received an update from Oak Ridge Air, which is our wood stove grant replacement program up in Oak Ridge. It also does some weatherization on homes to help them heat better, as well as some other programmatic works. I think the big challenge with this grant, we have two of them. The first one is due to end in November of this year. There still is a set amount of funding left, around the tune of about $1 million that the program is looking to burn down before the deadline of November exists. The group locally, so the nonprofit implementing the Oak Ridge Air program in Oak Ridge, they have hired another person to help get home interventions a little bit more quickly accomplished, and that's the approach to spend the remaining funding before the deadline. There's a second targeted airshed grant that we have that is supposed to expire in the summer of next year. We're working to send a grant extension request to the EPA to extend that by another 2 years. So we're working on what those potential budget adjustments and work plan needs are. We shared our federal grant status update with the board, which was an effort we were doing monthly this year when we had this environmental justice government to government grant that was terminated. The board has been interested in knowing the status of our other federal grants, so we've been providing that on an updated monthly basis. So those targeted airshed grants I mentioned are part of those federal grants. We gave a cybersecurity update to the board. So if you're not familiar, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality suffered a cybersecurity or a cyber attack earlier this spring. And so this was a presentation to the board that was reflecting on what DEQ was doing that perhaps got them into hot water with this issue. And are we making those same challenges or mistakes? And the answer is no. Our contract for cybersecurity is through the Lane Council of Governments. And being that we're smaller of an organization, it's easier for us to do things like, if you want to install something on your computer, you have to go to the administrator to type in the password to install that program on your computer, which was not a thing DEQ was doing and essentially was what created the problem to begin with for them. And then beyond that, I went through and shared the director's report, which does have some of the feedback that the CAC gave, particularly on comments and complaints and our enforcement. Nothing was particularly notable in the director's report other than a pretty expansive PR effort led by Matt in some of the public outreach and community engagement that we're doing. So that's my quick kind of onesie twosies of the board meeting.
Perfect. And do we want to talk about the ribbon cutting?
Oh yes, I totally. That was like the big thing too.
You were like, it was successful, check.
Done. So yes, thank you. I kind of like amazed that it was not in the front of my brain. But yes, after the board meeting, we did have a ribbon cutting ceremony. The Springfield Chamber was here. We had a lot of people show up. I honestly had a little bit of nervousness of like, you ever thrown a party and then all your flaky friends don't show up? Well, I've had that experience and I was like, hopefully we have some professionally non-flaky relationships. Turns out we do. There were lots of folks who were here to see some good faces around. So that was successful. So, yeah.
The CCs look good.
Yeah.
Isn't it impressive?
When I worked in broadcasting and we had federal requirements that were doing closed captioning, you would not believe how much effort and time we would put to make sure our closed captioning were like aligned with what we're saying. And fast forward a few years and technology just like does it today. So it's amazing.
One thing I'd like to note is if you were unable to attend, we were able to recognize Jim and his long tenure of service in front of everybody, which I thought was great, given, what was the number, Heather?
14.
14 years? Yeah, 14 years of volunteering his time and energy to lead this group, so.
So that's the expectation for the
Yeah, exactly.
Going
You beat
forward.
my
Do we count
under.
free chair years? Yes, you get to count those too.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Yeah, I was able to attend and I saw Evelina and I was really surprised at the turnout. It was really great and they busted out the giant scissors and everything. So maybe we'll have some photos at some point. So yeah, really good turnout. All right, so next on the agenda, we need to talk about the reapplication for membership. We have a couple of members who are a bit past due. I think I need to add this to my calendars or, so that since we have different times, so that it's more on the forefront of my brain. So Chris, you are up for, I guess the question is, do you want to stay on and oh, you already submitted your application.
He did.
All right.
They both did.
Oh, they both?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So I guess, do we just,
So the last time we went through and we did this, it was decided that for those who are already on the CAC meeting or the CAC group, they could participate in discussion, but then had to, of course, abstain from voting of whether folks want to keep them or otherwise.
and did they have to step?
I put him in the waiting room,
I think in the waiting room?
Yes.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if you do have a bone to pick and it's
Yeah.
a little bit harder to do that when they're in the room, yeah.
So
They can
should
watch
I?
the recording later, but. Oh, yeah, right.
I will note that.
All right, so should we just go through the application? Does that sound good?
I think that sounds good.
All right, so community segment, fire suppression. So you want to just read it individually? Do you want to go through this, read them out loud?
I guess you could just ask if everyone's had an opportunity to review it or not.
All right, has everybody had an opportunity to review it? Online, Paul, Ben, Teresa? Perfect. Well, first, I'd like to say that it's been fantastic having representation and having Chris come in. So I'd love to see that you are interested in staying on. It's been very helpful having these updates. So, do you have anything you want to add, Chris?
I mean, I'm an open book, so hopefully the members have gotten a chance to get to know me, right? It's a pleasure to be a part of the community and to serve. So, I feel sometimes like maybe I'm not pulling my weight, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the group and what we do. So, yeah, if you choose to re-elect me or vote me, I'm happy to run with you guys for a bit longer.
Perfect.
And these terms are for how long?
3 years.
3
3
years,
years.
Only seems like 5.
Wow, that's a.
Well, it's how you get to 14, right?
Perfect, so should we do one at a time and
I think we'll probably do one at a time, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we'll put you in the waiting room for a minute so that we can, as a group, go through. Perfect, so I guess we need a motion to,
I think entertain a
Right,
motion, a
entertain a
first and a second,
motion.
and then a vote.
or someone to,
Vice Chair.
They're wanting you to say, I make a motion.
I make a motion.
To reappoint Chris Klein to the
To
CAC.
reappoint, oh, sorry,
Chris Klein to the CAC.
to reappoint Chris Klein, to the
To this
CNC.
committee.
Yeah.
perfect, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect, and then all in favor? And then perfect, any opposed,
Aye.
please, oh, perfect,
Just discussion, I guess.
and then is there any discussion?
Well,
Okay.
usually the discussion and then the vote after the discussion, but I think in the, where we're at.
I just
Thank
wanted
you,
to-
no, I need help on this.
I wanted to make a comment that, I think it's really great to have someone with fire suppression on there. And I hope that during the fire season, that he's able to attend, and if not able to attend, if, we could get reports from him or something like that, because I imagine he's tremendously busy during fire suppression season.
Yes, I'll say that, so Chris Klein did have a little while where he was, I think it's like I forget exactly what the formal title is, but he was like the state forester, so representing ODF on state interest up in Salem. He was doing that for about 2 years, kind of as an interim role, and then is now back to his like former position. They sorted that out. So he has a lot of great insight and resource.
Perfect, so now we can do
I
the,
think Ben had jumped on, maybe wanted to say.
He said aye.
Oh, okay.
I was voting. That was his discussion.
all right, my order of operations was a bit off, so after discussion, I guess we do, all those in favor, say aye.
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 None opposed? Perfect, so that means Chris stays on.
Yep.
The committee.
And what we did decide last time was, is this something that the board has to like appoint and approve? And they do, so we have to, it's really just more of the next, it's a recommendation. The CAC has recommended that Chris remain or be reappointed for another term. So then we bring that up to the board. Yeah.
And then they give their final stamp of approval. Okay.
Perfect, okay.
All right,
Great.
I'll let him back in.
3 more years.
Yes.
All right. All right, Chris, so the CAC has made a motion and we will be bringing it to the board to keep you on the CAC. So next step, it'll go to the board for their confirmation.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, so moving on to the next reapplication for
Hot seat for
membership,
you now.
Peter. So I did not have a chance to review this one, so I'll take a, do my due diligence. All right, has everybody had a chance to look that over?
Yes.
I like the new questions. A little bit more information, a little bit more in depth, so.
Suppose we'll have to ask you to excuse yourself momentarily then, yes?
Yes, please.
Oh,
Does anybody have any questions? Comments about the application?
Or yeah, anything from you, Peter?
Anything from you, Peter? Do you want to elaborate on anything or?
I stand on everything I just said.
Perfect, all right, well.
What a politician. No, I just want to say that I think the mission of LRAP is just really vital for the health of our community, and I'm glad to be associated with professionals who are supporting that mission. I think we work together really well as a group, as a committee, and want to continue with doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come out and let you know.
Okey-doke. All right, so if everybody had a chance to look at it, I guess I would ask for
Entertain a motion.
entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
perfect, now some discussion.
You got it.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, I guess I would put it to a vote. The committee, all in favor say aye.
I,
Right.
None opposed? Perfect, all right. You can go grab these.
The formality of it is important, but it can sometimes feel a little like
It doesn't happen often either.
Yes.
Every 3 years,
Yes.
so you might have to.
having
refresh my memory
having
again.
two in a meeting is seems like a lot.
It goes by fast.
Some other
3 years.
meetings, they bring forward motions so they can be discussed extensively, so.
It was a landslide victory, congratulations.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Perfect, all right, so great news, yes, we can stay on. So our next topic is the LRAPA budget review. So this was brought up as a proposed topic and LRAPA staff was able to accommodate, so.
Awesome. Well, my name's Christina. I'm our finance director. I don't think I've met everybody in the room personally before, but I'm happy to stay after and chat if anyone wants to get to know me a little bit better. I put together a summary of the budget, so you didn't have to dig through the entire 45-page budget book. Of course, if you need more detail, it is in the budget book with paragraphs explaining things and whatnot, but I thought it would be easier to just kind of look at the summary document to talk about things. This is the approved budget. We, through this budget, are continuing to fund 19 positions here at the agency. There is a need to add a 20th, but the timing was not right with our funding to be able to do that this year. So there's a workload need, but we haven't figured out how to come up with the funds for that yet. You'll see at the very bottom of the summary is the revenue minus expenditures, and if there's a deficit, it's in parentheses, and there is a large deficit. We are slated to spend 400,000 more than what we think we're going to bring in on revenue, which, although is not necessarily an alarming situation at the current point, because we do have very strong reserves, it will become alarming if we continue that trend. So we're working both to reduce costs as much as possible and increase revenue. And the primary way to increase revenue is actually going to be to try to find new sources of revenue, because we aren't at a place where it's time to really raise any of the other revenue sources. So it's time to look outside of what we've traditionally looked at. So we're hoping to have some success finding new revenue to eliminate the need for a deficit.
And Christine, I'll just add real quick that so our revenue sources come from a few different places. One of the places is support from our federal partner, or federal partners, our local partners. So Eugene, Springfield, Cottage Grove, Lane County government, and Oak Ridge all contribute to about $200,000 a year. We receive state funding that is about $500,000 a year, and then we also receive federal funding that's about another $500,000 a year, and then the rest is through our permitting fees that we have, and those are our revenue streams. So I just want to
Thank
elaborate
you.
on that. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thank you. Let's see, the Title V fund is called the Special Revenue Fund, and it is self-balancing now. For many years, it was costing us more to do our Title V activities than what we were bringing in through permit fees. It is mandated that we keep both revenue and expenses related to Title V in its own fund, which is why you see it in blue. we're glad to see that because of the recent permit increases, it is now balancing more accurately. We're slated to bring in a little bit more than the expenses for this particular year, but we are still recouping from that fund being underfunded for many, many years. So there will come a point where it's pretty much dollars in, dollars out, even Steven, in the next several years. And then the grant revenue section is for grants that are donor restricted and have to be managed separately from our general fund. And that's the kind of salmon colored box down at the bottom. The only two grants we will have in the coming year are tag 1 and tag 2 that we know of right now. And those are pretty much dollars in, dollars out. They are reimbursable grants. So once we spend money on those activities, then we get reimbursed for that spending.
What page are you referencing right now? I've got the budget up. I just can't find.
It looks like this. It says budget summary. I don't know if
It's
you
in the
can see.
packet. I can pull it up.
Yeah, will you pull it up on the screen? That would be helpful.
I'll share too really quickly on the Title V fees from a revenue perspective. That fund was, we were spending more to it than we were getting. And then these fees are set by the Oregon legislature. And in 2022, the Oregon legislature raised Title V fees by, it was effectively worked out to being about 83%, which was a pretty large jump, but was a needed thing because not only LRAPA, but DEQ, the state as a whole, their Title V fund also was needing that additional revenue.
Right.
So what questions can I answer for you all? I want to make sure that you're able to digest everything that's going on with our budget. It's a little bit of a complex budget, but it can be simplified. I just need to know what questions you might have that I could help you dissect.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
There's funding coming from the state, you said. Now, the state budget hasn't been set yet this year, has it?
Well, so we have to just estimate based on what we think is going to happen. And if there is a major shift due to federal funding situations or what have you, then we just have to adapt and move forward. So if there are any cutbacks, either from the state or federal, we will adjust. We'll have to dip into our reserves a little bit more. But we do have healthy reserves, so there's no immediate fear of needing to lay off and things like that. We can manage it for a year, but we have to come up with a plan going forward for sure. Yeah.
And I'll mention, Peter, that you bring up kind of a good point and a valuable question in terms of not so much on the state side of things or some of these reflections happening, but we receive about $500,000 or so a year from federal funds. Through the Clean Air Act, there's a special section that we, as a government organization that implements the Clean Air Act, we just get uncompetitive grant dollars from it. The current federal administration under the Trump presidency in the proposed budget, which Congress still has to make some adjustment, but basically proposes what would effectively be $0 to that component of our budget, which is adopted, but the federal federal fiscal year doesn't start until October 1st. So there is we are kind of going with expectation and going off past expectation, but recognizing that what in here, dollars and cents, might not actually be a tangible that we are able to stand on, and we'll know that at least on the federal side of the coin by October 1.
But from a budget law perspective on what our requirements, our due diligence that is required of us, it's mostly revolving around the appropriation of the use of our dollars. So that's expenses. So as long as we are confident in the expenses side of things, that's what's really important from a budget law perspective. The revenue is kind of like, well, we just got to figure it out, right? So there's not really a budget law that says if your revenue was off in your proposed or approved budget, what do you have to do to rectify it? If it becomes a huge difference, we probably would do a supplemental budget approval through the board to adjust those numbers to reality, but we're not required to on the revenue side.
It would just be if we decide we want to internally, which we might want to, because if we are seeking other grant opportunities, we would need to demonstrate we have a need. And so we might do that through a supplemental budget to adjust the revenue so that it's more in line with reality for when we are asking for new money from somebody else, so.
So on the reserves topic, what is the goal for, 6 month, a year operating budget?
So the best practices is we're told is to have 4 months reserve. And with the current plan in place and the amount of reserves that we have about 5 years until our reserves that we're at reach that point of now we're hitting the best practice of at least 4 months operating cost. So
We're currently at about 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Depending on what the federal and then I guess state financial landscape is and how those changes definitely play into where that's at. But as we this spring, we're putting together the proposed budget, operating under the assumption that the funding we've been able to see many years for a long time, that's going to continue. And right now, a lot of it is just posturing versus actual tangibles that we can act on. But I'm definitely seeing the iceberg out there and trying to steer away from it.
Great questions, you guys. Thank you. Anything else we might be able to help you understand?
I have a question. Is the audio been consistent or is it still really quiet?
It's overall pretty good. I guess have a follow-up question though. So you said it was a 6 months operating budget, which is equivalent to this deficit over 5 years. Is that what?
Well, we have in reserves right now about 6 months of expenses for our general fund and special revenue expenses. I don't include the expenses related to the grants tag 1 and tag 2 because if we lost the funding there, we would also not have expenses there. So it solves its own problems, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah.
So it's just looking at the green and blue when considering what is our average expenses. And currently we have about 6 months. But as you see, we're going to be dipping into that by 400,000 in the next fiscal year, which means then at the end of that, we won't still have 6 months, right? Because we're dipping in a little bit. And what Travis's remark was that in about 5 years, we won't be able to dip anymore.
Right.
We'll start eating away at the 4 months situation. So we don't want that to happen.
I think some nuance that I want to put out here too is you look at that dollar in parentheses at the bottom of the 400-some thousand. If I was to kind of break apart how much of that 400,000 is personnel versus like capital expenditures that we spent, we did do a remodel, and I think there is a good component or portion of that that is driven by we needing to purchase a vehicle or we're needing to make other one-time things versus just ongoing costs that are continuous.
Great questions. Anything else online?
I guess following up on that, Travis, so that was for the last year's budget that would have gone up, right? So how would that affect this year's budget?
Well, when we have some older fleet vehicles that we need to retire and then replace, but that's not a ongoing expense. That's a once every 5 years type expense. So we try to balance predicting those things over time. And so part of the 408,000 is related to, I believe, one of the fleet vehicles. So, of course, that's not 400,000, right? That's probably more like 30 to 40,000, but
There's also the exterior siding that we're looking to do next year as well. We went through our remodel, we did the interior, the exterior now, not just from a look at, make it look nice perspective, but from a maintenance. The roof was an unexpected maintenance that took place when we were doing the remodel, but there is siding components that need to be sealed better. And so some of that work is incorporated in this budget as well.
Thank you.
One comment.
yes.
Don't really know a whole lot about budgeting, but I do understand that the audit was completed relatively recently
Well,
and came through pretty well.
It's almost completed.
Almost
It's not
complete.
quite finished. So we were really kind of behind the 8 ball when it was time to do our audit because we were in the middle of converting to a new software system for our financial management software. And we had a very tumultuous conversion to our new software. And there were just some issues with the way it was reporting and things like that. And so we were not able to start the audit until after the audit was already supposed to be complete.
Okay.
And so we are behind on getting the audit completed. And I'm supposed to be receiving a draft from them of what their report will be so that I can ask any questions or clarify anything. A lot of times, you can kind of negotiate the way the findings are reported. There will be some findings this year related to the conversion of our software because it was such a bumpy conversion. And I don't know what other findings they are going to propose, but sometimes I have been successful at negotiating the sort of the level of the finding to make it be a little less harsh. And so we have not gone through that process yet, but we will. And then they are prepared to make the presentation to the board of directors at the June meeting. So it will be complete by then, for sure.
And part of that process with the auditors and the kind of, if you'd say negotiating, comes down to like their process is they come in, they look through our stuff, pull data to support what they think is taking place, and then compare what they think or what they understand our process to be to what's required legally and what best practices are. And sometimes when they're identifying like things might not be in alignment, some clarifying their understanding of our process helps. And they're like, oh, I was assuming or thinking this. As you explain it to me, I understand better. So therefore, maybe it's not so.
It's a dialect.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So professional auditors from,
We're using Eisler
Okay.
CPA this year, and we have used them for many, many years.
great,
We do plan for, not this, we're about ready to start the next audit. We will have finished one and then we'll roll right into the next one. So we're not gonna do the full RFP process for the 1 month turnaround that we have, but for the next one, we are gonna do a RFP process and get new quotes from several of the reputable firms here in town and see if we're still wanting to stay with Eisler or if it would be wise to make a change, so.
And it might not be a full like RFP in the sense we put a proposal out and they collect. Our procurement, which is our Title I in our rules and regulations, says, what level of dollar amount, if it's above this dollar amount, then here's all the steps you have to go through before you do business with whoever that may be. I think the auditor call is
It's
just
below.
more, the requirements are more, we need to get like written quotes, but not so much hey, public, here's this opportunity to do business with ORAPA.
Thank
Yeah,
you
it's-
for
it's-
clarifying, yeah.
it's really encouraging to see that, the audits are proceeding and as member of the public, it's a really nice thing to see
It's important.
with these
yeah.
complex budgets, and
Right.
stuff that an audit is done and comes through well.
Absolutely, yeah. I actually really appreciate the audit process. Some finance professionals dread audits, and I'm not saying that I'm, excited to have a party around an audit, but I appreciate the process of going through the audit because it really does help you refine your processes to make sure that you're doing things the best practice. Because things do change over time. There's new guidelines that come out pretty much every year to hone in on different aspects of financial management. And so it's good to have that process because Otherwise, you forget to update your processes to match the new guidelines. And so it just really helps you stay ahead of the curve on that kind of stuff. So it's important both internally and for the public with transparency. So.
Yeah, it's a good, healthy accountability component.
I definitely view it as they are on our side as far as helping us be better. The time that it becomes adversarial is if you're getting audited from the federal government. That's a whole nother ballgame. This is, we select a CPA firm to do it. Really, they're consulting with us to help us be better. Whereas a federal audit is something altogether different. It's, we think you're doing something wrong and we want to figure it out.
It's a starting point of a threat of non-compliance.
Right.
Does the state accept the federal audit or the private audit?
Yes, that's the standard way most organizations do.
We have our funding, we receive enough federal funding that we're required to go through what's called a single audit, which is a little bit of a deeper dive. So every year we do take on that single audit process because of the amount of federal dollars we touch.
So it's definitely a mandatory thing that we have to do to stay compliant and continue to receive grant funding. But the federal audit, if they were to come, or a grant funder doing an audit, that's more of a punitive situation, whereas this is just a maintenance situation. So, yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, well, if you guys think of any questions outside of this meeting, any time of year, if you have a question related to finance or budget or anything like that, my email is always available to you. As with all of our emails here at LRAPA, we have standardized them. So it's always first initial, last name at lrapa-or.gov. So you can pretty much guess who you want to email to and just type out their email and get it right now.
And it's on our website.
And it's also on our website, yeah. So thank you.
Perfect.
I do have a quick question. So non-compliance or / violation fees, do they fit general fund revenue for permits and fees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like if somebody gets a non-compliance, a fee assessment, and then they pay, yeah, it comes in through permits and fees. What we are required to do is any of the proceeds from those non-compliance assessments that we give, we end up funneling then to one of two places, either Lane County or a SEP that the source that's being fined would choose. So LRAPA doesn't get to keep that revenue. We are just processing it and moving it on to the appropriate parties, which is a bummer because leading up to having to do the fine, we have put some sweat equity into that situation, right? But that's just part of what we're supposed to do. So we don't gain anything from setting those
Does it
fees.
incentivize us from finding problems?
Which
so to
is
speak?
good because then it keeps everybody more honest, right? We don't have any skin in the game. There's no like we need to find $400,000.
Yes.
We're not going to just go give out fines to make that
I think
$400,000.
Budget fixed,
Yeah.
The structure of that, I think, is healthy to
Yeah.
avoid what could be a circumstance where an organization would be inclined to say, oh man, we have a revenue pitfall, we need to go find non-compliance so we can take enforcement benefit. Outside of Lane County, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, they have the same structure, but their funding from non-compliance goes towards the Secretary of State, the State Treasury. And so that same structure of statewide is just one more local level, but under, and this is state statute, those enforcement penalties we assess go to Lane County General Fund. One of the things that we'll talk more on as the summer unrolls, we have through our regulatory authority an opportunity to implement a supplemental environmental project. So what that is if someone comes to us with an application, says, hey, I have this idea for this project that would remove, PM from the air or protect the environment in some way quantifiably, we can approve that as a potential project. And then when we're in an enforcement conversation, LRAPA doesn't get to provide any pressure or influence one way or the other, but those who would be paying the penalty can choose to have those dollars fund one of these projects instead.
And all of those projects would be projects that are managed by other organizations, not LRAPA. So for instance, if a source in Oak Ridge was being fined and they wanted their dollars to stay in the Oak Ridge area, if we had a nonprofit or another organization in Oak Ridge that was doing a project, they could say, let's keep it in Oak Ridge.
That's really
Yeah,
cool. I didn't know.
So it's something that our regulatory structure has allowed for. LRAPA has made good on that in the past or using that, but in more recent years has not taken advantage of that as much. So something Matt, Colleen, who you had visit us a couple months ago, our enforcement asbestos manager, we're trying to put together some structure in that program again, so more opportunity for that can happen.
I did have one more thought when we were talking about keeping everybody honest. So it keeps us honest to where we wouldn't give unnecessary penalties out, but also it prevents the opportunity for a source to bribe us, right? Because we aren't, like they could say, well, just give us a fine for that and then we won't worry about this thing we're violating, right? You know what I mean? It opens up too many opportunities for fraud if we do it any other way than the way we're doing it, so it's good.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, so on the agenda, we have added a spot so that we can kind of keep a running list of upcoming topics for the CAC. And so if anybody has ideas, this is kind of a chance to talk about some things, maybe, look at the order here. I will say during the last board meeting, the one thing that the board did mention to me as a potential topic was outreach to the community, right? And something that we could, and so that's one that we could add to this. And, there's not a set order necessarily, maybe, kind of depends on, but there's an opportunity if you guys have ideas to write them down and we can figure out what we might be able to present for future topics. So you'll see on here the bylaws review. That was one thing that was mentioned last time. Maybe we as a group can go through and look at the bylaws. We also have talked about in the past having somebody come in and just kind of give a 101 on the permit process.
I'll say that the board has also been interested in kind of getting the life of a permit is kind of how they're phrasing it. So for the June board meeting, we will be coming to the board, which is just an informational presentation that says when someone applies for a permit, here's kind of what happens and here's all the different things that could take place from permit application to compliance assessment. And so that's similar. We gave the board this presentation. If that kind of review could be helpful for this group, very much could do that. And I think that too, just general questions about whatever it may be from an air quality perspective, we can add to the list and then come forward with some interesting discussion points that who knows where those could lead in terms of ideas or solutions to stuff.
Perfect. And then I see the SEPs is on here, so
Yes.
that's great.
Just talked about, yeah.
And then smoke school. Apparently there's been some advancements in smoke school and getting certified to be able to do the method 9 observations. So I don't know if you guys know about that or have interest in that, but that's kind of a tentative topic that could be interesting to learn more about.
Yeah, I'll
So-
elaborate just a little bit. So smoke school is in our space, a regulatory thing that we can say is that's too much smoke coming out of that stack. So then the question is, well, how do you determine how much smoke is too much smoke? There's actually school called smoke school where you go and you learn this EPA method 9. Now, and it still is, you can travel to wherever it's happening. You can stand outside for what feels like hours because you just sit there till you pass it kind of sort of thing. And cost money and all those. So now you can
Travel expenses.
So the EPA has said we approve a method 9 training approach, which uses VR instead of actually going somewhere. And so I like the technology and those things. And so we got some VR set goggles and have staff who are utilizing now smoke school training that they have to do. the VR goggles as opposed to.
And they had actually said they were excited about it because the last training just happened to be during the middle of like a really rainy, cold day. And so they were out in the rain and cold, and granted they got through it, but they were like, if I have the choice to do it like indoors and like can like really focus on it, it would be beneficial for them. So
100%. So do you have information somewhere posted of how that's applicable to the industry?
In like what sense do you mean? Like,
Well, like normally, so I used to physically attend the ones outdoors, but I wasn't aware we're doing the VR. Is that how you call it?
I see
So-
what you're saying.
yeah.
You know, that's a thought, an idea of like,
Like a
okay,
library.
well, we have this resource, how might others, including
Yeah.
permitted sources who need to benefit and get smoke school?
Right.
I hadn't thought about that, but that is definitely worth sitting on, thinking on, digesting, and see where that resource might become really readily and available and appreciated.
So
That's what I was hoping that was for.
how we can do it from the classroom.
Well, I mean, our interest, to be fully honest, we're completely self-interested in man, it's
Cost savings.
cost to go out there, it's only available in so many places, and it's this real big, but the point from the regulatory perspective is, well, we have to do this too. Is totally valid, and I think if there's a way to share a resource, we should be certainly investigating that.
And then you'd still have to pay for the actual cost of the course, but you
Yes.
wouldn't have to invest in the goggles if you were able to come use them here or something. That's a
like that, yeah.
possibility we
could
need to
figure out
explore,
like
yeah.
a approach that could be agreeable.
That would be great.
So adding on to that, for you guys who don't know, it's basically you're calibrating your eyes to be able to look at this, and it's actually every 6 months.
Yes.
And so that is one of the big challenges. It's probably one of the most frequent of all of the renewals that you have to do. And it is interesting about, because it's kind of seasonal and sunlight dependent, so that's why they require it every 6 months. So if there was a better
Spring and
way,
fall.
it would be really helpful for industry to be able to.
An example where this adds to kind of sharing resources and making things more available. So in Oak Ridge, they have an ordinance on wood stove smoke that's a little bit more strict than what is in the Eugene Springfield area. Ordinance in Eugene Springfield area is a 40% opacity, and Oak Ridge is down to 20 because of historical air quality challenges they have had. But Oak Ridge also has under the authority, they're the ones who enforce that ordinance as opposed to El Rapa as we enforce in Eugene Springfield. So it's their compliance officers who, to be able to enforce on this, have to be certified in smoke school. And so that cost is another thing where even on municipalities, smoke school can be difficult.
Yeah, so if anybody has any other ideas that we'd like to add to this list, I think, the idea is that we'll choose it based on availability. I mean, if this life of a permit's gonna be on a hot topic coming up, it would just make sense to move that up the list and those types of things, but always open to ideas. All right, does anybody have any now that they wanna add to our list? All right. So I guess we'll move into roundtable. We're about right on time. Why don't we start with the folks online? Teresa, you want to get us started on roundtable? You have anything today?
Sure. I am not the lead on any of these things, but I thought, and it's kind of last minute, but I thought I would share that the Lane County Firewise grant is open. And Lane County is also in the process of updating our community wildfire prevention plan, CWPP. And that grant closes on the 30th, so in like 3 days. But, yeah.
Yeah, Teresa, Matt and I were at the Shed Institute last week, where there was a presentation being given. I forget the name of the professor from University of Oregon, but Brendan was there talking all about that grant that you guys have going on. It was great to see you guys out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Paul?
I don't have anything for roundtables today.
Thank you. Ben?
I also don't have anything.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Chris?
Yeah, so I guess the one thing coming up where my agency interacts with El Rapa, backyard burning, and then how much lead time currently we're looking at the 15th which is what I think is in the rules. But there's a pretty horrendous forecast on the horizon, and so if we needed to move that ban up, what kind of lead time do you need on that to make that announcement and get it to the public? And
Yeah, it's really kind of like if, let's say hypothetically, if it was if the day was Monday and you're like, we want to close outdoor burning season, I would say probably like Wednesday would be the day of it, because we issue at 7 o'clock every day is when the next day's burn notice changes. But we also like to provide a little bit of some communication efforts and things like that ahead of time. And so that in that circumstance, that does become okay, drop everything. Our focus is now the rest of today, that notification gets made, and then maybe next day to get those materials together. So 2-day lead time.
Ideally 3, 2 at a minimum.
Yeah.
3 business days,
Yeah.
not including weekends, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, well, prior to this last 10 days to 2 weeks of overcast and drizzle, I would say we were going to be in fire season probably by the first week of June. Now maybe the third week, it's gone off some, but I don't know. I'll try to show. Well, I was going to say it's basically we have a really bad forecast. I was going to try to share my screen, but it says I can't. I don't know how hard it is.
I think we can turn that on real quick. Yeah,
I was going to just show you a couple of graphs I'm looking at.
Sorry.
the little one next
Yeah.
to it.
Did it?
All right,
Okay.
give it a shot.
So, let's see if this works. Perfect. You guys see that?
It looks like it's coming. There we go.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is there's a couple of forecasts here by the National Weather Service, 6 to 10. So this is for basically the first week of June. So this is a temperature, so above normal temperatures, and I won't show you every one of these charts, but basically the short and long of it is this trend continues. This is the 10 to 14, which shows there's Oregon, shows us above normal, shows us about average for rain, but that's not a lot for the average. And then the 1 month, the entire United States, but Oregon part of that. And then the 3 month is the same way. So I guess group awareness as far as, what LRAPA has to do with dealing with smoke, advisories or clean air concerns for the vulnerable populations. Just be aware.
Yeah.
I'm getting really a pit in my stomach for what the future holds based on these forecasts. Obviously, the 1 month, the 1 month and 3 month, that's a ways out. Things can change, but it doesn't look good at all. So how do I unshare so you can get your screen back?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I appreciate the heads up on that. I also think I know that you're sharing the temperature, and Chris will know this before but a lot of times people think like, oh, well, but the precip, we want the rain and we want the precip. But I think what's really from a fire perspective, really concerning is the temperature, because when it gets super, super hot, like we have just a heat wave for a few days, then all the moisture dries out that much more than if we just had not quite so heat. And then it's just dry, and until it rains again, it just remains that way. Did I kind of have that right, Chris?
Yeah, that's correct. So, anyway, just an awareness. And I don't know. I did talk to some of the county fire chiefs. Yes, last week we had a meeting, and we were going to try to hold off to the 15th. So but since I've got you as an audience, I guess that's our target. But if it changes, I'll let you know, and I'll give you some lead time, but it's a very unfavorable forecast. So
Thank you, Chris. I will say Steve from McKinsey reached out to us on Friday after your conversation.
Okay.
Heads up, 15th could be the day. And so we were already kind of.
Okay. Yeah.
But certainly if it moves up because it needs to, as much notice as possible is
Okay.
appreciated.
Very good. That's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Peter?
Nothing to share, no. I'm happy to be here for another 3 years.
Evelina?
I don't have anything today. Michael? No, nothing for me either. So, any finishing?
Way to stay on track.
Right? All right. 5 minutes early. Well, thanks everybody. And yeah, if any questions come up for Christina or any ideas for future topics, otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, think
Thank
on all this
you.
stuff.
Thank you.
Adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
All right.